What did you learn about President Trump's stance with the EU? I thought there was a handshake with Mr. Juncker.
Yes, I was a little bit surprised by that, because I thought, particularly that morning, I thought the idea that the Europeans had come forward and said, look, let's do no tariffs on cars. For the Europeans, that was a fairly big deal. But he treated it as a sort of derisory offer and said, no way, that's not nearly good enough. It was a bit like someone had come in and bid for one of his buildings, and he just said, look, I'm not even considering that. And that, I think, that was much worse. And then the fact that he went for them as being the next people after China. And I think many Europeans will not be that happy, especially about the stuff he said about Merkel, or for that matter, the fact that he wants to go for the World Trade Organization as well. So it wasn't a good day for Europe with Mr. Trump.
Do you get the sense, being over in Europe, that there's credibility with what President Trump says when the behind-the-scenes conversations tend to be very different than the president's rhetoric?
Yes, I think there's a bit there. I mean, if you look at what Trump's position on trade, there's like two things you can point out. The first is that this is something that he genuinely believes in. You look back at Trump's record, he's changed on lots of things, but he's someone who's always had a protectionist streak or had strong problems with trade agreements. He was against NAFTA. There are not many business people who are in that category. On the second side, there are quite a lot of European and American business people who would say, look, we could open up more trade between Europe and America, and that would be to most people's benefit. And so people quite like the idea of him causing a little bit of a fuss, but then something coming from it. Not as much as China, where I think pretty much every business person you talk to says something along the lines of, look, I'm worried about a trade war with China, but we really want Trump to open up these things for us. But there is a little bit of that with Europe as well.
And of course, the third prong of that approach is about NAFTA. You asked the president about NAFTA. Here's what he had to say.
I would say the WTO was the single worst trade deal ever made. And if they don't shape up, I would withdraw from the WTO.
But John, in reality, he might not have the actual power to do that.
Yes, as you know, the link between Donald Trump saying he can do something and him having the capacity to do it, it's not always 100%. But on the whole, once he starts down these routes, he keeps on pushing and pushing and trying to find ways to do it. Sometimes he finds it difficult, but on the whole, once he's started on this, he'll keep on saying it, I think. It's his style to go that way, and in fact, generally throughout the interview, the general tone of it is that he was doubling down on being Donald Trump, if you want. He's not someone who's retreating. He's not someone who's saying, I look at the midterms and I'm worried about the Democrats. Mueller, he described as illegal. He is someone who, at this moment, is saying, look, I'm going to forge ahead because what I'm doing, at least from his perspective, is working. The American economy is doing very well. Wall Street's at a record high. I've got the Mexicans on side about NAFTA. I'm about to get the Canadians, and then I'm going to move on to the Chinese and the Europeans. That's the way he is looking at the world, wrongly or rightly.